So Nia D. Hemmings recently made a challenge for the Tower of God community asking us which Tower of God character we relate to the most. And I find this question super fascinating because it requires a lot more thought than just favorite character or favorite design or favorite fight, which are all super fun to talk about. But this is much more human, I guess. You have to think about it and fully flesh out, and I don't know, it took me a little while to decide which character I relate to. But I stumbled upon one that I think I want to talk about. I can't really explain why exactly, but I'm going to try my best. That character is Hell Joe. And I promise it's not because his name is Joe. I've reread The Floor of Death a couple times recently, and every time I find myself liking Hell Joe more and more. My first read, I was like, he's just some goofy villain who gets, the red fist of powers, and Yurik just beats him. That's really what I thought of Hell Joe, like kind of an unintimidating, lackluster villain. But upon further rereads, I find his story to be much more interesting and much more relatable. So the reason I chose Hell Joe isn't necessarily because of me specifically, I just think he's very relatable in general. Hell Joe was an ordinary, whole repairman guy. He didn't have any high position or money or status. He was just repairing the holes in the Floor of Death to allow Shinsu to travel around. And despite that, he had a lofty dream. He wanted to leave the Floor of Death. His soul and all the other inhabitants are bound there, and yet his mind wandered, right? All he wanted was to leave the Floor of Death. And he got lucky. Yurik stumbles upon him, gets to know him, likes him a lot, and gives him the little baby red Thrissa. And Yurik wants Joe to use this power to leave the Floor of Death. But of course, Hell Joe abuses this power instead. Now, of course, his goal is still to leave the Floor of Death, but instead, he spends most of his time and all those years just being a tyrant on the floor. In my eyes, it's almost like he lost sight of his goal completely, right? In a way, he's still pursuing it, but he got goons together and he developed his powers and he just became a tyrant. He dethroned the Dasa family, right? Like, that seemed to be a bigger priority for him. It's much more complicated than that. But what's interesting is that Joe ends up finding himself just sitting around doing nothing most of the time. We see him just sitting there watching TV, and he's always asking for more stuff from the outside, but he's just sitting down doing nothing with this new ability. Contrast that to the old Joe as a whole repairman who had that lofty dream, and he was trying to actively work toward that goal. Really interesting, right? I feel like we all are in that position sometimes where we're just people going about our lives. We have a dream, and then sometimes we're lucky enough to be given the tools to maybe pursue that dream. Or maybe we were able to even achieve that dream to some extent, but then we find ourselves slacking, we lose sight of our goal, we end up realizing that it's harder to achieve than we thought, so we just kind of give up. The closer we get to that goal, we almost fall away more. Like, we fall more flat, even though we're literally closer and we can still achieve it. And the laziness aspect is obviously very relatable. I guess I'll say that. I'm a very much a procrastinator, right? If there's something that needs to get done, I can very easily fall into the, I'll just do it later mentality. We all do it, but I find myself struggling with it maybe more than others. But it's very human, right? It's very human to, even if you're given something, the tools to get something done, and it always feels better when you do it, you still fall into the path of just turning on the TV like Hell Joe, just reading the comic, and days end up passing by, and you look back on the week and you're like, what did I even do? You know what I mean? I find that super interesting, and I love the way that Hell Joe's story ends, because that god that gave him this ability, he takes it away, and Hell Joe almost redeems himself by saying, I don't want to leave. Like, Yurik would have given him that opportunity. Yurik still cares about this friend of his, and Hell Joe says, no, I'm gonna stay. And what I love is that Yurik wipes his memory. And the way I interpret this is it's almost like Yurik is giving him a second chance, pitying him. Maybe Hell Joe will go back to being the old Hell Joe once his memory is wiped. He will forget that he was an evil tyrant, he'll forget all the people that he hurt and all the horrible things that he did, and instead just focus on his dream again. Because maybe And this is an interesting take. Maybe if Hell Joe works to achieve the goal, and instead of just like being gifted this power, maybe things will be different. Maybe he can earn his way out of the floor of death instead of Urich just saying, well, come on, let's go. I like that a lot. I think it's very human, which is funny because, you know, the Hell Joe and all the inhabitants are very like insect-like, and that's kind of the whole theme there. And I don't know, I find that super relatable, not just the procrastination side of things, but just Hell Joe's mentality, Hell Joe's sort of mindset. And I think in a lot of ways, it's interesting that the old Hell Joe, before he had the Red Thrissa, Urich told him he was bigger, he stood taller, he was like the bigger man. I love that. I think that's so cool, and it's a good sort of retrospect on ourselves where it's like, even if you have status or someone is super wealthy or whatever, they're not the bigger person because of that. It's what they do with it. It's what they do with what they're given and with how they're born. I don't know, like it's about what you do with what you have, not like, oh, what if I had this? And I feel like that's what makes Hell Joe, the old Hell Joe, a better person. And maybe that's why the newer Hell Joe said, nah, I'm gonna stay. Maybe in a way he knew he didn't deserve it. Maybe he felt that guilt with everything that he had done. I'm not sure, you could interpret it in many different ways, but I love it. I think it's very relatable, and I find myself personally relating to Hell Joe, which is interesting because, like I said, I initially didn't think much of Hell Joe, but I really do think he's a well-written character and a really good antagonist in Tower of God. I'm not going to spoil Naya's choice for what he did in his video, but I loved it. I loved hearing his own dissection of the character, and he really related it to himself. It was awesome, so go check out Naya's video. The link is down below. Go show him some support. I'm sure the other Tower of God content creators will be doing their own videos, but I want to hear it from you. Which character do you relate to the most, and why? Because anybody can say like Han Sung or Wang Nang, but I want to hear exactly why, and I think it'd be cool to continue this discussion. Thanks for watching, everybody. I appreciate the support, and I'll see you in the next Tower of God discussion video. Take care.
If you want to get to the top, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. This is Rachel. Better do it or I'll push you and you'll die.